You know, I never really understood the hate Clarence got. Sure, I'll be the first to admit it can be gross and weird at times, but gosh darn it, I think it's a pretty solid show in its own right, especially when it takes itself seriously and tackles topics that almost every child experiences. These episodes are few, but they reveal hidden sides of each of the main characters, ones we don't typically get to see. So grab a box of tissues for your tears. I got way too many comments last video with your dirty minds. Subscribe and try not to cry while I cover the heartbreaking lore of Clarence. When you're a kid, all you want is to be special. Whether it's being the fastest or smartest, you look for any possible reason, no matter how small, to feel special. Because being special means you have value. And that's how this episode begins, with Jeff going through his morning routine and telling us that he's not like the other boys. He's special because he likes doing things like brushing his teeth and making lunch. Okay, bub, but today is a bit different. Today is the day where Jeff's class is split into two groups. The quill group, aka the gifted kids, and the crayon group, aka the regular kids. Jeff sits on his desk as he confidently waits for their results and is anticipating being put in the quill group. Because if he's in the quill group, now he has definitive proof that he's special. But he gets his results back and Jeff is devastated. He speaks to his teacher and pleads with her about the ranking, looking for any reason for the ranking to be a mistake, but the teacher tells him there's nothing she can do. There was no mistake and Jeff belongs in the crayon group. When you spend your entire life believing that you're somehow exceptional, but don't get the results you expect, what are you to do? The new classes begin and while the other kids are having fun, Jeff is miserable. He's different, he has to be. He can't be lesser than those other kids. So he leaves his class and tries to sneak into the gifted class, but he gets caught immediately. What was bro thinking? Entering the class like this? He might as well enter doing the Tom walk. Jeff gets kicked out of the class and is left to his thoughts. He feels alone and defeated and dreams about the rest of his life, doing a regular job and marrying a regular capybara. Okay dude, no need to show off. But in all seriousness, he's going through an existential crisis. One of the hardest things in life is accepting that things didn't go the way you wanted and having to course correct in accordance to the way things did happen. It's something that we have to face way too often. Something that we unfortunately start to learn at a young age, even if we're not ready. Jeff wakes up to an empty classroom and sees the placement result of everyone in his entire class. He didn't get the highest or lowest mark, but he was right there in the middle. He was average, and that oddly brings him relief. Because the next day, Jeff goes through the same morning routine as earlier, but this time, instead of trying to justify why he's special, he accepts that he's average, and that's what makes him special.
I am a crayon, but not just an ordinary one. I am special. My test results have shown that I am perfect, perfectly average.
Out of all the episodes of Clarence, this hit me a little too close to home because I had the exact same experience as Jeff, except I was placed below the crayon group. Yeah, boy needed that extra help. I didn't have a pleasant time in that class because all I can remember is not wanting to be there because I didn't want to have less value than the regular kids. But what this episode helped me realize was I would have had a better time if I accepted that I needed that support and that there's nothing wrong with that because what you can or can't do isn't what gives you value. What makes you valuable is that you're you. Time for Sumo's story. The episode in question is considered by the majority as the best episode of Clarence. It's an episode that follows Clarence's friend Sumo as he tries to impress his father, an episode about being seen, an episode called... We begin with Sumo in detention. We don't know what he did, but I assume it's because he's answering a questionnaire so he can reflect on his actions, and the dude is nailing it with his insightful answers such as, nah.
Do you regret what you did? Nah.
He turns the page over and is caught off guard by the next question.
What do you want most in life? And how are you going to achieve it?
You can see that question hit Sumo, but before he could process it, Clarence comes to detention and causes a ruckus by showing off his sick ninja skills. Detention ends and the boys are hanging out at Sumo's place. They're just goofing around and having fun, but Sumo is off in his own world.
Hey Sumo.
You know those rare assignments you get as a kid that for some reason stick with you, and it could be something as simple as a science fair, but for whatever reason the way you approach it is different, like it means something special to you. I think that's what's going on here. Sumo doesn't typically care about school. His grades aren't the best and he often gets detention for, his condition. But from the get-go, this question struck a chord with Sumo. Maybe he's thought about it before passively and is more actively thinking about it because of the assignment. While the boys were about to do something, Sumo's father arrives and asks him to clean the yard.
Dad, we were gonna build a...
Sorry, Jan, so he can play tomorrow.
Sumo's friends offer to help him, but he just blows up at them. His friends leave a little hurt and Sumo ends up working well into the night cleaning up, which brings the emotional element up front for the first time in this episode. Sumo only blew up at his friends after his father didn't listen to him, and the first thing he does after cleaning up is insert himself in the conversation his father was having at the dinner table, trying to get his father's attention.
Hey, Dad!
The dad was having a conversation about boats and how he'd love to have a boat. When Sumo yells,
I'm building a boat!
Sumo never had the intention to build a boat before. He was just speaking for the sake of it, hoping to get any attention from his father. And what does his father say after Sumo tells him he's gonna build a boat?
I'll believe it when I see it.
This sets Sumo's heart ablaze, and now he knows what he wants to do with his life. He wants to build a boat. That night, he starts researching boats and how to build them, and the next day, he begins his project. Sumo builds the boat every spare moment he gets. Whether it's scorching hot, cold and rainy, or just plain muddy, Sumo is working tooth and nail to build this boat. One of the days that Sumo's working, Clarence tries to help, but Clarence being himself gets distracted and ends up hitting Sumo with a plank. Sumo snaps at him.
Dang it, Clarence! If you're not gonna help build a boat, just get out of here!
The old Sumo would have laughed and just joined Clarence with his shenanigans. But as of right now, Sumo has one thing and only one thing in his mind, to get some approval from his father. The next day at school, Sumo apologizes to Clarence for yelling at him, which I feel is a normal response to getting hit in the head with a plank. But what breaks my heart is to why he yelled. It wasn't because of the plank, but because
I was just frustrated.
Sumo is neglecting everything in his life. His friends, his health. I mean, the dude packed a single onion for his lunch. This is a whole issue on its own. That night, when Sumo's working on his boat, his father comes in to check on him. In the background, it's raining, and Sumo's father does something that puts his character into perspective.
Well, don't catch cold out here.
The simple act of hanging the light for Sumo and telling him not to catch a cold shows that he's not a bad father, just kind of an emotionally distant one. Just like in real life, there's no such thing as a truly good or evil person. People are a jumbled mess. Sure, he doesn't show his love in the traditional way, but as you saw and will see, he's gonna do it again in his own way. After the interaction, Sumo continues to build his boat. He's hammering a nail and he hits it, but it bends. And then all hell breaks loose. I think it's at this moment that Sumo realized that his father does care for him in his own way. Maybe he blew up because he was frustrated in himself for not realizing it sooner, or his dad for just not showing it better. But the whole point of building the boat was to get his father's attention. With Sumo destroying everything he was working hard towards, all that time and effort gone, he was ready to call it quits. But his friends show up and don't let him. They end up building a boat together and take it to a lake to test if it floats, and it does for about a minute.
I did it! I did it! I did it!
With the boat sinking and the boys panicking, Sumo's father arrives in a canoe and saves them.
The thing I want most in life is a boat. So I built a boat. It's not perfect, but it's my boat, and I love it.
The boat is an allegory for Sumo's father. Sure, he may not be perfect, but that doesn't make him a bad dad. At the end of the day, he was always there for Sumo, and even takes a picture with his son to show that even though the boat sank, he's proud of him no matter what. Looking back at this episode, it relates to everyone at a personal level. Whether it be through grades, sports, heck, even bad behavior, kids are constantly seeking their parents' attention. And when parents neglect to provide it, we are left feeling frustrated and it can turn into resentment. It's the job of the parent to provide consistent attention and approval, and also show it accordingly. But maybe it's also on us to realize that though they didn't show their approval the way we wanted, they did it in a way that they only knew how. Or not, this is all subjective. Anyway, time for Clarence's story. Clarence is one of those shows that you either watched or didn't, but there's one episode that everyone has watched and seemingly remembers, even people that never really watched Clarence, and that's because of the memes. But also how dark and relatable it was, and that episode is called... The episode begins with Clarence at a show and tell, and he's showing off his favorite toy called Little Buddy. It's dirty and damaged, but that's only because Clarence really loves it, and it's obvious that he plays with it a lot. And hey, which one of us isn't a bit damaged, am I right? During recess, Clarence goes around the playground and tries to get other kids to play with the Little Buddy, but he gets rejection after rejection. This kind of hurts his feelings, but I get it from both sides. Clarence really loves this toy, and when you love something, you want to show it to other people and get validation, just like how you love this channel and want to subscribe, right? On the other hand, Little Buddy is the stuff of nightmares, and the kids weren't trying to be rude by refusing to play with it, they just didn't want to get haunted for the rest of their lives. Clarence sees this one kid and rushes over to him, but as he tries to get away, he gets hurt and starts crying. A teacher quickly rushes over and sends Clarence to timeout for 5 minutes, and as he tries to explain that it was an accident, the teacher threatens him with 5 more minutes for talking. So Clarence defeatedly sits down and counts the time till he can go back out and play, but the minutes turn into hours, and the hours turn into years, and all of a sudden he witnesses the collapse of society. Well, at least that's how it felt for Clarence. This is probably the most accurate depiction of how timeout is as a kid, and that's something I honestly really appreciate about the show, that it can capture what it feels like to be a kid. Clarence starts to realize that it's been over 5 minutes, but is scared to say anything because of the consequences of talking, so he starts panicking, not knowing what to do when.
Your 5 minutes was up 5 minutes ago! Don't play before the bell rings! Well, that's the way that cookie crumbles.
This entire episode could have been prevented if this teacher showed some empathy and apologized for her mistake, but she didn't. For the rest of the day, Clarence is despondent. His friends try to talk to him and tell him missing recess is not a big deal, but he's just not there. When he gets home, Clarence starts to lose it.
I just wanted people to play with.
This is honestly heartbreaking. We know from earlier that Clarence loves Little Buddy to death, and he was already having a bad day as it is, but accidentally ripping the arm off was the thing that pushed him over. Ashamed of what he's done, Clarence takes his scooter and rides off with Little Buddy. He doesn't know where he's going. He just needs to get away. He ends up in a field and digs a grave for his friend and throws him in. Although missing recess hurt Clarence, I think given a couple days he would have been in better spirits. It's the fact that he hurt something he loves that really broke him. Over the next couple days, Clarence is going through it. His mom tries to talk to him but no answer. He continues with his daily routine, but he's just there physically. Emotionally, he's absent. In this funk, Clarence ends up cutting his hair, changing his clothes, and even starts misbehaving in class, which lands him in detention with delinquents. Essentially, he tried to destroy everything that made Clarence. A lot of people see Clarence's reaction as extreme, and I agree to an extent, but I think they neglect how Clarence is feeling by acting like this. Everyone is different. Just because you consider something as not a big deal may be huge for somebody else. This whole situation is clearly hard on Clarence. And since he doesn't have a healthy way of expressing his emotions, he keeps it bottled up inside, and it keeps building up until one day the recess monitor is called over to the playground because there's an incident that's going on. She gets there and sees Clarence harassing people with Little Buddy's broken arm.
You blow that whistle, and you're making a big mistake.
I'm sorry, Clarence. I understand you're going through it, but that does not mean you're safe from the fashion police. Boy, why you dressed like that? Right at the climax of the situation, when everything's about to blow up, Clarence gets pantsed by a delinquent, and as retaliation, proceeds to sucker punch the culprit.
Whoa, children fighting! I can sell this!
Clarence gets sent to the principal's office for a special punishment, but is met with his teacher instead of the principal. She tells Clarence that she's noticed that he's been having a hard time lately. With all the detentions and now fighting, this is serious and needs to be dealt with immediately. But first, she has something for him.
Someone here wants to see you.
Little buddy, this is...
Clarence starts crying. This is the first time he's shown any emotion since he's gotten in trouble. Everything that he's bottled up to this point just starts coming out. When Clarence hurt Little Buddy, it broke him because he never thought he would do that to somebody he loves. And not knowing how to deal with the guilt set him on this downward spiral. He just needed some reassurance or validation but never received it, unfortunately. His teacher says they know how upset he was when he lost his recess and it wasn't fair. So his special punishment is a recess that Clarence gets all to himself. Just like that, Clarence is back to being himself. Just a little kindness goes a long way. I love this episode of Clarence because of the relatability. A lot of us have experienced something for some reason affects us deeply. On the outside it may seem small, but to us it isn't, and that's okay. What you feel and think matters. Unless you go out looking like this, then you kind of deserve to get punched. All Clarence needed was a little empathy and kindness to feel better. And once he got it, he was no longer in that funk he fell into. The story of Clarence revolves around growing up. And though we often remember the fun times, it's also when we start to get exposed to the harshness of the world. Whether it's experiencing new unpleasant emotions, shaky relationships, or accepting the reality of who we are, the world is a tough place. But it's also simultaneously a beautiful place. Because it's also a place where you can experience pleasant emotions, build great relationships, and grow into who we want to be. If you made it this far in the video, check out my animated story time. Like, comment, subscribe, and look both ways before you cross the street. Peace.